Good evening, everyone. We're here at another installment of HAPI Talks. Tonight, we have with us the Honorable Assembly Member Charles Barron, a legend in our time, one of the greatest politicians that we have. This brother has a very distinguished background, and he's going to talk a little bit about himself and just kind of introduce himself to the audience.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It is indeed my honor. You know, I've been blessed to, this year I'll be 70 years old in October 7th. So I'm blessed to be on this planet for 70 years as a black man. Many black men don't live this long. So it is indeed an honor and a blessing to be living this long. I grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, was born in Queens. I'm really New York. I was born in Corona, Queens, Flushing Hospital, stayed there from 1 to 6. But I really grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in the Lillian Wall projects. I know you'll call them housing developments, but it's the PJs to us. It's the projects. And you know, project life and all that goes with it. I had to read books to find out that I was oppressed and poor because, you know, and we was just having a good time. My mama used to keep the doors of our house open all the time to my friends. And at 16 years old, I started getting conscious. I read this book called The Last Days of the Congo about Patrice Lumumba, an African leader. And I said, man, you know, that's a bad dude. Then I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I started to become more conscious at 16. The brothers thought I lost my mind because I used to dress. I mean, I used to have suede fronts, leather fronts, alpaca shirts, and, you know, those lizards and alligator shoes and tailor-made pants and all kinds of cashmere coats, and, you know, thought I was cute. And then one day, out of nowhere, I just radically changed. They saw me the next day. I had a black dashiki on with a free Huey button. I had a big afro, black corduroys, and combat boots. They said, what the heck? What happened to you? I said, man, I ain't doing that no more. Man, I've been reading, I've been watching these Panthers and watching this. So some Black Panthers used to come to the Lower East Side, and I used to argue with them, Mark Holder and Tony Martin. I used to tell them, what revolutionary group? Y'all got the big sign up there. They can see you. What kind of revolution is that? They said, come up to Harlem. So I came up to Harlem, and there I saw Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, who I later on met. And we had rallies at that one Police Plaza or Center Street, one Center Street for the Panther 21. I remember the Free Angela Davis rallies, the Free Huey rallies. And so I started doing work with the Black Panther Party. Wasn't known, wasn't in the leadership. I was one of hundreds and thousands of members, but that's where I got my political education. My poor mama in my bedroom, she saw a big picture of Huey Newton and Bobby Seale with guns. And she said, what is that? It was a huge picture. And then I had another big picture of Angela Davis, you know, with the gap in the tooth and the big afro. And this one, she got confused. I had a big picture of Che Guevara in his green army outfit and color. And she said, why the white guy? I said, no, he's not white. He's Che Guevara. And I had to explain all of that. So that's where I grew up. And then 30 years later, I moved to Bedford-Stuyvesant, and I worked with the Black United Front with Reverend Herbert Daughtry, and I later joined the House of the Lord Church because they unwrapped the European contamination of Christianity and presented Christ as a Black revolutionary Messiah. So I have my Black liberation theology, my Black radical Panther revolutionary ideology, and I was ready. Then I met my beautiful queen, Inez Barron, who's the love of my life, and we took it from there.
Okay, great. So what made you what inspired you to get into politics?
Power, bottom line, power. We was with the Black United Front doing a lot of demonstrations like we are now. I'm still out there on the streets on this latest issue, but demonstration after demonstration, every time we turned around, we didn't have any power. There's a big difference between influence and power. When you have to demonstrate, scream, holler, when you have to get people in power, persuade them to make decisions in your best interest, that's influence. So we had to constantly be trying to influence these sellout Negro politicians that were more loyal to the Democratic Party than they were their people. They were more loyal to their personal ambition over the prioritization of the needs of the people. So these are the people we had to go to, and they were in the hands of the white power structure because the white power structure created them in the first place. Martin Luther King said that he was concerned that the white power structure would pick and choose black leaders, give them prestigious positions, and give them resources, some for the community, as long as they had control over them. He called them manufactured leaders. And we still got a lot of manufactured leaders running around here today. So that's what made me get into the electoral arena. I was in East New York and I was protesting against police brutality. I was protesting against this big machine that we're bringing in, this incinerator to burn waste wood and turn it into electricity and get $1 million a year from Con Edison. And every corner I turned to try to stop that, I was running into politicians. So I said, I want to get some power. And I found out that the city council has the power to pass the budget, has the power to pass city laws, and most importantly, had the power to determine what was going to be built on city-owned land. And that's when the people told me, run. I joined my block association. I organized around a myriad of issues, tried to take the fireboxes out of East New York and give us phones to call up the fire station. Stop that. We had coal-fired furnaces in my schools. We made them bring in the gas and bring in natural gas. And then this incinerator, we stopped that. So they said, man, you're doing pretty good. We want you to run. And I eventually ran. And in 2001, after my second run, I won the city council seat and we launched Operation Power. People organizing and working for empowerment and respect. Power made me run.
Okay, could you just tell us, give us a brief chronology of your political history, like the years?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, and the years you started and the different offices that you held.
I started in 2001. Actually, I ran in 97. I got 4,000 votes. The machine got 6,000 for the incumbent. Everybody and their mama they had against me. And then she was term limited out, and the machine came at me again. But I was fortunate to win that race in 2001. Once I got in, my goal was to build up the infrastructure of my beloved East New York community. So from 2001 to 2009, my first 2-3 terms in there, we were able to get 3 parks renovated. We were able to get a new youth center, $12 million, run by Black people, Man Up Inc., Andre Mitchell. We were able to get 12,000 units of housing and all of it affordable to our people. East New York is not gentrified like Harlem is, like Bed-Stuy is, because my wife and I, she's the council member now and I'm the assembly member now, we were able to stop it. So in our 17 years, not just up to 2009, in those 17 years, we were able to get all of that. And at the same time, I was taking on the governor. I interrupted him at his State of the State address, and he was shocked, 2,000 people. I took on police commissioners and mayors and people in power, and we still were able to have 3 new schools come into East New York. We had 4 parks renovated now, 12,000 units of housing, the youth center, a new library's coming in, $50,000 or $50 million worth of scholarships for CUNY students. And at the same time, even though we're running in Democratic primaries, we are totally independent from the Democratic Party. We have no links to them. We're using them like they use Black people. We know our people blindly vote Democrat. So we know it would be better for us to run in the Democratic primary than independently in the general election, because our people blindly vote Democratic. And we were able to wipe out the local Democratic Party club and have radical politics. My wife is the council person now. I'm in the state assembly. The community board is controlled by Operation Power. Andre Mitchell is the chairperson, and Karan Allen is the deputy district manager, and Melinda Perkins is the district manager. So we have that. We have the county committee, the 2 district leaderships, and the judicial delegates, all under Operation Power. We wiped out the powerful Democratic Club in East New York, and now we are delivering.
Wow. So at what point did you make the transition from New York City Council to New York State Assembly?
I was term limited in 2013. I was term limited out, and I didn't have any more time left in. My wife at that time was already in the state assembly for 5 years. So she ran for my seat and won, and then I ran for her seat and won. So now I'm in the state assembly for my 5th year, and she's in the city council.
In terms of its functionality, the difference between the two, the New York City Council and the New York State Assembly, can you just elaborate on that, and just in terms of the difference in their functionality?
That's a very good question and a very important question. I want to encourage all of our revolutionaries, radicals, Black radicals. That's who I'm looking to influence. Black radicals, Black revolutionaries. Get into the city council. Here's the difference. The city council is a unicameral body, one body. You don't have to go to another body to pass anything. So it's unicameral. There are 51 city council members. Of the 51, when I was there, 14 were Black, 11 were Latino, and 2 were Asian. 27 to 25 for the whites. Which means what? You can have any bill passed. You can control the bills. You can control the budget. You can control who becomes speaker, unless you got Blacks in there that are in the pockets of the power structure. So we went for that. That's the difference. And the state assembly is a bicameral body. So you got an assembly and a Senate. So whatever passes the assembly has to pass the Senate. And then it goes to the governor for him to sign it into bill. It's the same thing with the budget. The budget has to pass the assembly and the Senate, but not in the city council. And here's another deep thing about the city council. Since it's a unicameral body, if you get 34 votes on any bill, that is an override number. So if the mayor vetoes the bill and you have 34 votes, you can override his veto.
Wow.
The bill becomes law. That's power. That's power. The mayor can't even stop your bill. The mayor can't even stop the budget you want to pass. That's power. However, in the state assembly, you have to use influence because you don't have the majority. There are 150 state assembly members, and there are 63 state senators. So for our caucus, is 62 members, like maybe 40 something in the state assembly and 15, 16 in the state senate. We don't have the majority like they do in the unicameral body in the city council. You are the majority. As a matter of fact, we are the majority population, Blacks, Latino, and Asians in New York City, the most powerful city in the world. You are the majority. Matter of fact, Blacks and Latinos are 55% in New York. And then when you bring in the Asians, it comes up to 62%. Whites are minorities. I remember I was running for mayor for briefly. I know I didn't have the money. I was just messing with them. So one of the reporters said, how are you going to get the white vote? I said, you mean the minority vote? He said, no, the white vote. I said, yeah, that's the minority vote. I don't need them. I don't need them. If the Black and Latinos vote for me, that's the majority. So I don't need the white vote because they already know I called Israel a terrorist state. They already know I said white men have too much power. They already know that I said that we need a radical revolution in America. They already know I'm anti-capitalist, I'm anti-imperialism, that I want this whole stinking system to be dismantled and replaced with a more humanitarian system that people control. So they knew all of that. They thought I was going to back off it. Are you going to back off some of this stuff so we can get the white vote? I said, you mean the minority vote? They said, no, the white vote. I said, no.
So I'm sorry, that actually actually brings me to one of my other questions. These district lines that keep getting moved around and the ever-changing demographics and how that impacts who we vote for and who we elect, because people vote towards, in most cases, towards on racial and ethnic lines. A lot of times now you see a lot of Asian or others in the assembly or the council because of just these ever-changing demographics that we have, and particularly in New York City. Like, what are some of the things as Black people we can do to protect ourselves? Because it seems like our population is shrinking and others are growing larger at the same time.
Another excellent question, because these questions speak to power. But just closing out on the state assembly and the city council 1 minute, there's $178 billion budget in the state and a $90 billion budget in the city council. If we had our act together, we can have a lot of control over that budget and we can deal with the poverty. But to your question directly, the way they disempower the Black vote is several ways. One, what you mentioned, redistricting, redraw the lines. I literally had to go down there when they were drawing the lines and say, oh, hell no. No, you're not drawing my district like that. Give me that pencil. No, that's how they do it. You sit
so
there.
We actually stop that?
Yeah, they sit there and they draw in your line. I said, no. So what they're doing now, they're drawing lines to bring more whites in our district. So Yvette Clarke's congressional district, that used to be 65% Black, is now 50-something% Black.
Wow.
The same thing with my congressional district. They brought it down to 50-some-odd%. But when they got to my city council line, I said, oh, no, we ain't doing that. You know why I love East New York and I love my district? It's 70% Black and 20% Latino. There's no gentrification in East New York, not in my part of East New York, not in the 60th Assembly District, and not in my wife's council district. So redistricting is one way that they disempower. The second way is gentrification.
Yes.
Gentrification. So if Bed-Stuy loses 15%, 16% of the Black population and gains 600% of the white population, the demographics are changing. Harlem lost 14% of the Black population and 400% white increase. Crown Heights lost 11% of their Black population. They have a 200% increase. So if you're doing the lines and you're gentrifying, then the census count, you're not counting us, that depopulates, and then voter suppression, saying we need IDs and need all of these things in order to vote. You're going to disempower Black people. Adam Clayton Powell, one of the most powerful Black elected officials in our history, the way he became the congressman from Harlem, 1/3 of Harlem was in white communities. He redrew the lines and took them out and made a Black community, a Black congressional district. He, by the way, was the first Black city council member. Then, that's in 42. And then after that, in 44, he ran for Congress because he redrew the lines. And guess who replaced him? A brother by the name of Benjamin Jefferson Davis. He became the first Black communist city council member in 1943. Wow. If that happened then, we can do a Black radical movement now.
Yes. So, one of the things that's very dear to me is the what I like to call the reverse migration. And I see a lot of Black people willingly, I won't say willingly because economics is usually the driving factor in these things, like leave places like, New York and other major cities, and I guess relocate. And what that does, that, there's strength in numbers, as we know, as you just stated, and this kind of takes away our power, because now we lose those numbers in those districts that we once had. And then others to come in, and obviously they take control of the political power. So in a sense, we see our power declining in areas and communities that we once had. I'm sorry, guys, you're gonna?
No, go ahead, finish.
So with that, we talked about briefly a minute ago about the $170 billion state budget and the $90 billion city budget. Can you elaborate or talk about the interrelationship between economics and politics and how those two work seamlessly together?
Another critical question. We live in a political economy. There's an interrelationship between politics and economics. The way a lot of these fat capitalists get rich is because their relationship with politics and economics. America has a series of what they call industrial complexes. An industrial complex is the relationship with the CEO on Wall Street and the politician in Washington and the state houses. They come together so that they can get public money and private money. There's a $178 billion budget. Most of the contracts, most of the subsidies go to white male private developers to build housing. That's how Donald Trump got rich, getting public money. I remember, what's the guy from Chrysler, the guy who was the head of Chrysler, and he wrote a book on his vision on how he helped liberate or his vision that got Chrysler going. What vision? Lee Iacocca. What vision? He ain't had no vision. He got $2 billion from Congress to bail out Chrysler. What vision? You had white skin and you were a male. That's your vision. White skin, male, and you got $2 billion. Give me $1 billion. I'll bail out of East New York and write a book on how wonderful I am. So that's the relationship. So now, so that it works for us, and when you live in a capitalist society, see, the root to our problem is we live in a racist, parasitic, predatory, capitalist system with a warmongering, imperialistic foreign policy. And they are exploiting countries all over the world. Capitalism, its economic foundation was built on the theft of land from the indigenous people and the theft of us from Africa. So when you hear them talk about politics and economics and philosophers, and they mention Adam Smith and say he's the father of capitalism, and John Keynes, when they say he, Keynesian economics, that ain't nothing. Anybody can be successful if you don't have to pay for real estate and labor. You name me a business that wouldn't be successful if you didn't have to pay for real estate and labor. So the foundation of this capitalist system was built off the back of our enslavement and the theft of land from the indigenous people. So when we look at politics and economics, now that I have this knowledge of how this thing works, I want to get out of the politics, not my movement. I want our people to stay in it and keep taking these local seats. But I want to start community land trusts so that the community can get this land for $1, just like they gave it to these white developers. They gave them land for $1 in your community. I want our community to get some of that land, and we should get the subsidies. You know how they call them? Subsidies. Ain't that interesting? That's free money from the government. How is it that when we get free money from the government, it's welfare? When they get it, it's something cute, subsidies. Well, either we're all on subsidies or we're all on welfare. So I want us to get into purchasing land. See, it's important to connect the politics with the economics. so that now from the grassroots level, now that we have the city council seat and the state assembly seat, and we know what it takes to get land, we know what it takes to get the subsidies and the capital to build housing and build other things, now we should fight for that to happen for us the same way as happening for these white boys who don't have an ounce of skills or talent that you may think they have, because I met them. They have access to capital because of their white skin and because they are males in this capitalistic world. So we have to bring politics and economics together to say that my taxpaying dollar, I want some of my taxpaying dollar to go to a community land trust and also worker cooperatives. We don't want to get into black capitalism. I support Buy Black campaigns, but we need to get into Ujamaa, cooperative economics, where we collectively own enterprises. And so the workers own the enterprise, not someone at the top owning it, and they hire us and give us a little wage. And then whatever our work produces, the capitalist, or black or white, whoever is on top, they manage what we call the surplus value of our labor. Meaning, if you working for me and I pay you $100 a week to work, and I put in $200 for the material for whatever the product is, and we sell that product for $1,000, I give you your 100, I take my 200, and then the $700 of profit I keep, and you have nothing to do with. That has to change. The workers have to determine how that profit is going to be spent. That's moving more toward a socialistic, cooperative economic plan than an individualistic, capitalistic, exploitative plan. That's the marriage.
So right now, obviously, there's a lot going on with the senseless and murder and, I guess you could say, lynching, if you will, of George Floyd. There's a lot happening in the streets, and there's a demand for justice. With that, we talk about our estimated $1.3 trillion spending power that we have as a community, as a race. How can we use our economics and our buying power to influence our politics so we can stop things like police brutality?
That's another excellent question. You know, I find it interesting that here we're in the 21st century, a $1.2, $1.3 trillion consumer nation. We had a black president. We had a black attorney general. We have a black head of the state assembly in New York. We have the black head of the state senate in New York. We have a black attorney general in New York who's pathetic in my opinion. We have all of that. And yet we have more poverty, more police brutality, and all of that. How do we have a community like ours where blacks are in the majority? How come we're not doing what they did in Tulsa in 1923, in Rosewood in Florida in 1921? How then do they have oil wells, land, control the means of production, control all of the social cultural institutions in their community, so much so and so prosperous that the white crackers had to get the Klan and the government to burn their city down so that they can take the land back? How do we come into the 21st century with that kind of money, capital, and we don't have not one community, not in New York State, I don't believe anywhere in the country, that looks like Rosewood or that looks like Tulsa, where we own the banks and everything? We don't own nothing. We are domestic colonies, meaning that we have the population, but the land, the economy, the social and cultural institutions, the police, the hospitals, the schools are run by people who don't live in our community. That's a colony, even though you're the majority and you have the black elected officials who are a part of the problem. I say if we get a black radical movement, particularly in the city council. Let me tell you something we could do. Right now, my wife has a bill, Inez Barron, council member Inez Barron, has a bill in the city council that calls for an elected civilian complaint review board, not a selected one like they have now, an elected one by the community. The community would elect from community board districts 17, and then 4 from the most brutalized districts that are most abused by police for 21. This board would have the power to investigate, the power to subpoena, and the power to determine the penalty for police officers when they violate us for a series of low-level crimes. Then, if it's murder, or if it's manslaughter or assault, we would set up a independent prosecutor, not a special prosecutor in Tish James's office, because she's selling us out, but an independent prosecutor, so that we could have that person prosecute police. The best way to curb police brutality, to me, one, if the masses rise up and said, we ain't taking it no more. There are 2 million Black people in New York and 2 million Latino people. If a couple of 100,000 of us saying this government is going to stop until they go to jail, then the district attorney should prosecute them and send them to jail. Short of that, this bill will allow for the people to do it. Police got to know that they're going to jail. They're suffering consequences. Anything short of jail. I'm going to support these bills that are coming up now. You know, they're making a big deal over 50A. That's the assembly bill that says the police should have transparency and we should know their background. And they're making that the big issue. That's weak. That is weak. We've learned the background of some of these officers already, and they still let them go. That's weak. If an officer punches you in your face, my brother, for walking down the block and you were doing nothing, I want him prosecuted for assault. I don't care what his background is. I don't care if he has a clean background or if he has a dirty background. He punched you, he should go to jail for assault. These bills about no more racial profiling, the Constitution already said they wasn't supposed to do that. A bill saying we should ban the chokehold. It's already against police brutality. Yeah, but we want to make it a law. Okay, you already saw them choke Eric Garner, and everybody walked. I don't think, that kind of stuff. We should say a couple of things. One, you go to jail through this independent effort by Inez Barron and the advocates, or you put pressure on the DA to do it. We put pressure on DA Ken Thompson, may he rest in peace, when he was in office, to indict the Asian police officer who killed the Kai Gurley on the stairways. Remember that case?
Oh, absolutely.
Shot him on the staircase.
The pink houses.
Right. Unarmed, just going down the stairs. He indicts him. He convicts him. And then he says, no jail time. I don't know how many cases I've had where we either got an indictment or didn't get a conviction. And here's another thing to do. Like these officers that are charged with second-degree murder in Minnesota, they have to go, if it's the same as New York, it has to go before a grand jury to get the indictment. That's just a charge. They get the indictment, then you have to go to trial, and you can have a bench trial, which means the judge, or you can have a jury trial. So you have to get the conviction. Then you have to have a sentencing phase. So after you get all of that, you got to make sure that they receive the maximum sentence on that. That's what we go through. And 95% of the time, Abner Louima, the officers went to jail. Maybe 1 or 2 others, but 99% of the time they walk. They either don't get an indictment. So that's what we need to happen. Second to that, I think we need to have community patrols that are in our communities monitoring the police like the Black Panthers did, because that way the presence of that brings down the possibilities of the police acting out. Me alone, I used to drive around in East New York when the stop and frisk in question was a big deal. I used to drive around, and when I see a police officer stop, I used to jump out and say, "Officer, I saw this whole thing. You're violating this young man." He said, "A council member, I know who you are, but you're interfering with my work, and you're not supposed to do that. I am a law enforcer." And I said, "Sir, you're interfering with my work because I'm a lawmaker. I make the law you're supposed to enforce. And right now you're violating your law. This is my citizen. This is my constituent. I'm doing my job. Let him go." He got angry and he said, "Go ahead." And I said, "Now write up that you stopped and frisked him. Write the form up." He walked away. I'm saying that to say that they're still doing it. They're just not writing it out, so you won't have a count. You'll think the numbers down.
Right.
But that's some of the stuff we can do about police brutality. And then the bottom line, people are going to get tired. I think that rally cry is going to change from "hands up, don't shoot, I can't breathe," to "hands down, shoot back, now you can't breathe." It's going to go to an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a life for a life. And for those of you who get upset when there's violence, I warn this city, I warn this nation that if you keep rejecting peaceful means of change and justice, violence is inevitable. And don't blame me, the social forecaster, for the violence, just like you wouldn't blame the weather meteorologists for the storms they predict. But we are not going to keep dying. So that, Charles, will you denounce the violence? No. Will you call for peace? No. I call for justice, and I denounce the violence of the police. And this time they're upset at the violence because they burned down a police station and they bust into Gucci's. And I have no mercy for Macy's. They bust into Macy's. And yeah, sometimes we do our own neighborhoods, but this time they went downtown, which is why they put in the curfew, because they bust into CVS and some other corporations that they probably called up Cuomo and de Blasio, said, "You better stop these people. They're messing with capitalism now." The stock market dropped for a minute because of the coronavirus and because of the protests. So I am not one who's telling our people that I'm going to denounce violence. And you know what Martin Luther King said? In 1967, when we had the same rebellions, I call them uprisings and rebellions, they call them riots. They asked Martin Luther King in 67 to denounce the riots. He said, "No, I'm going to denounce the conditions that caused them to riot in the first place." And he said, "A riot," this is the King of Peace, "a riot is the voice of the unheard. You need to hear my people." And these civil rights leaders of today denouncing violence, King didn't even do that. He called for justice and he didn't believe in violence, but he didn't denounce them. Then they said, "But Dr. King, 22 people were killed." You know what Dr. King said? "Yeah, the National Guard killed them, not the rioters. They were destroying property." This is Dr. King. And now they want to go back to Washington in August for another march and more speeches, when Dr. King went back to Washington, or was organizing the Poor People's Campaign, to stay there and have militant civil disobedience, stop airplanes from taking off, stop government buildings from functioning until they had a $60 billion anti-poverty program. You want to stop violence, America? You want to stop violence? Stop the violence of poverty. Stop the violence of mass incarceration. Stop the violence of unemployment. And stop the violence of your police. That's the violence that I speak against.
Wow. So how can the average person, particularly here in New York, support a bill that Inez Barron has in the city council? How can we use our estimated $1.3 trillion to support something like that?
We should start a movement from the ground up. The masses should be on the rise. Organizations that are fighting for justice and that are concerned about all of these bills that the Assembly will be passing next week. I'm going to support them, you know, profiling and all of that stuff. We've been saying that. When Abner Louima was killed, I mean, when Amadou Diallo was killed, 41 bullets, we had a bunch of reforms. Remember that? And then that didn't work. So 41 bullets wasn't enough. So they had 50 for Sean Bell. More reforms. They need to be retrained. They need to be cultural sensitivity. Yeah, you know my cultural sensitivity? If you murder us, send them to jail for life and give them a Black history book to read while they're in jail. That's my cultural sensitivity. They don't need retraining, they need jail. So what we can do now, call up the city council and say that we want Inez's bill passed on an elected civilian complaint review board. Let's start some movements and demonstrations around that to say that we're going to have a massive demonstration. Inez and I will be out there Monday at City Hall calling for this bill to be passed. They should have massive demonstrations for that. See, what I'm afraid of is that after all of the elected officials finish their photo ops at demonstrations with the people, after they finish all of their press conferences, all of their speeches, all of their, you know, webinars or whatever they're doing, we should then do the real thing. We should do the real thing. And that is to say that we're not going to fund the police department for this equipment and military equipment that they're getting. Why don't they vote against that? You know, many of these Black and brown politicians that we have in office, they voted for a state budget that cut $2.5 billion from Medicaid. Cuomo's budget, after this hypocrite is parading around as though he's doing a great job with the daily reports on the pandemic, he should be sent to jail. They should make a citizen's arrest. Do you know when this thing first started? He had an executive order saying the nursing homes, the most vulnerable population, has to take coronavirus patients. That's murder. We had to fight him until he finally pushed back after a lot of death. You're not supposed to have coronaviruses in nursing homes. And then you cut Medicaid, cut $400 million from the hospital budget during a pandemic. And then remember we had the no cash bail law? We passed it. He rolled it back so that the judges can have more discretion in putting pre-trial detainees, people who weren't even convicted, they had to go to jail because they couldn't meet the bail. That's a death sentence now with the coronavirus in there. And the reason why I singled out Tish James, and I'm so angry with her, we had this brother shot 9 times, Vassell in Brownsville, 9 times by 4 police officers. She refused to indict any of them. And then the worst thing she did just today, as we're doing this broadcast, a white judge said that Jalil Montecalm, who's been a political prisoner under the Black Liberation Army, he's been given 25 to life. He had perfect behavior in prison, a perfect record. He's been in there for 49 years. 49. He's supposed to be let out after 25 when you have a good record, because the parole is based upon your time served in prison, not your original crime. You can't change that. A white judge said that Jalil should be released because he has health issues and he wasn't given a death sentence, so let him out so he doesn't catch the coronavirus. The white judge was letting him out. Tish James, this history-making Black, who is the first attorney general that's Black, she appealed it. So we had to stay the release until they worked the appeal out. He caught the virus. Now he has the virus. And just today, the appeal overturned the judge and he can't get out. Come on. Come on now. People say I should leave Black politicians alone for what?
Yeah, those are the main ones. Wow. So kind of sort of got into this a minute ago, but Still want to ask it. How can we introduce real legislation, let's say on a New York State Senate level, assembly that will, change this paradigm we're in, and not something like the reform for the officers, but something that's real, that like you alluded to, or that you said a little while ago, that will actually include real jail time for them.
Right.
How can the citizens, how can we, the average people, help and get a bill presented on the Senate floor, passed and signed by the governor? What do we need to do?
Well, right now, we need to have that kind of motion. See, as we do this police brutality stuff, and even if these 4 officers are thrown in jail, we still have a systemic problem. Somebody said to me, Charles, all the police aren't bad. There's a few bad apples. It is not a few bad apples. If a so-called good police officer sees one committing a crime against us and has this blue wall of silence and says nothing, you're just as bad. Just like you tell the Black community, if you see something, say something. Well, if you see something, if you see one of your officers doing something, you say something. So I think we should get together, and when you have mobilization, this is key, mobilization around temporary mobilization around issues should become permanent organization for power and policies. So you need permanent organizations. Don't wait for the next person to be killed, and then we rise up again, tear up things for a minute, then go back and wait for the next person. We've done all of this before. Right. And then you get these, I don't want to use wrong language. You get these so-called leaders to come out there and get on TV and say, we got a package of reforms. And all of this is BS. If we get real people, real organizations, if we have a Black Lives Matter movement, then we need to take that movement and let's run some people for office and take over these local seats, all that motion, and let's take these policies and make these issues so that we can make these policies. And Inez, I think, is the strongest policy out there right now. We should unite around that one and come up with some more. Then the bottom line is we're not going to be able to vote our way to freedom. We just won't happen. You know, most of the legislation that's passed in this country is based upon the masses, the people on the move. Right now, if I asked you, and I don't know myself, who were the sponsors of the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act? You don't know who sponsored it, and I'm assuming you don't.
No, I don't.
Well, I don't either, because they were irrelevant. It was Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement, and it was the Black Power movement that made that happen. That's why we got to combine the streets with the legislation, with the electoral politics. Look at Zuccotti Park that was taken over by the Occupy Wall Street movement. They didn't occupy Wall Street. They occupied Zuccotti Park, and they made issues around taxing the rich. We are the 99%. This is what democracy looks like. But you have to turn that mobilization into organizing for power, and organizing for permanent legislation, and organizing to make sure that they don't pass budgets that oppress. See, the biggest problem with all of this is capitalism. It's a racist, parasitic, predatory capitalist system that keeps us in poverty. The real violence is poverty. So if we have elected officials that are in the street with us on this issue around George Floyd, but then they go back to Albany and back to City Hall and pass a budget that cuts our lifeline out of us, that's hypocrisy. They need to go. That causes us now to get into a world of crime, not making excuses, but if people don't have education and if people don't have access to have healthcare and access to jobs, if unemployment is double digit and poverty is double digit, some are going to work hard and go to school and have 3 or 4 jobs, and some are going to get into a life of crime. And then, as I was saying to you earlier about the industrial complex, America profits off of crime. It's called the prison industrial complex. They have a group out called Prisons for Profits. And now they don't even have to build more prisons. They're building and manufacturing ankle bracelets. So when you get out, they make millions off of ankle bracelets. They want you to commit crime. Some of the communities upstate have prison economies. Without the prison, they would have no jobs. They would have no contracts. So we need to fight prison building. And then there's the healthcare industrial complex. You call it Obamacare. They couldn't even get a public option. The private health insurance companies under Obamacare were laughing their way to the bank because you still had high premiums, you still had co-payments, and you still had all of the same things, but more people got health care. But it's all private capitalism. We should have single-payer health care in New York State. There's a bill that would make it free health care for us in New York State, and there's a payment plan for that. That's the kind of stuff we need to mobilize. Reparations. We should do it state by state. It is phony what they did. You saw that reparations hearing they had in Washington?
Yes.
That was phony. Check this out. 2008, you had a black president. 2008, you had a Democratic Senate. 2008, you had a Democratic House. 2008, you had John Conyers, may he rest in peace, who was the chair of the Judiciary Committee where H.R. 40 was in, that he couldn't get a hearing on it for all those years because he wasn't the chair. He becomes chair with a black president and a Democratic Congress, and the bill doesn't even come up. Now they bring it up. Now, when you got a madman in the White House and you got a Republican Senate, now you bring it up and you're waxing eloquently at some hearing? Please.
So you mentioned Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act a minute ago. And you said that the private developer, the private insurance companies were laughing all the way to the bank, and more people got health care. Where did the resistance come from of capitalism, people making money and people getting health care? Where was all the pushback coming in at?
Insurance companies. They pushed back all the politicians and they said, we'll give in a little bit so you can insure more people and say it's successful, even though still 25 million people weren't insured. We'll give in a little, but you have to keep it all under our control. They didn't even want a public option, which would mean that you can do your private stuff still, but you had an option if you didn't want to go private, there was a public option. They squashed that. That wasn't even nowhere near the ideal. Single payer would be the idea. They didn't even want a public option. Obama, I'll give you another example about Obama. We gotta, we gotta wake up. Obama's talking against the police brutality now. And remember, he made this big speech about George Floyd. He needs to shut up. You had 8 years in office. Shut up, Obama. You had 8 years in office with a black U.S. Attorney General, Eric Holder. Brother Brown was killed in Ferguson. Eric Holder went to Ferguson, met with the family, and prosecuted nobody as a U.S. attorney. You had Tamir Rice. You had Trayvon Martin. In your 8 years, you didn't prosecute a single police. And now you're going to come out here talking some trash? Shut up, brother man.
Wow. On the notion of prosecution, we have something that happened recently in Central Park with this woman, Amy Cooper. And all too often we get these false accusations accusing people of color of committing crimes. Can we do anything, or I guess in the sense of passing legislation or a bill that would prosecute those who falsely accuse others?
I signed on to a bill that's out there already that's going to say if you use 911 as a racial basis, that it is now a felony. So there is a bill out for that. But I want to remind you that how white women historically have done that to us. It was a white woman that falsely accused the Scottsboro boys. Remember that?
Oh, yes.
For rape and sexual harassment. She lied. It
Right.
was a white woman that falsely accused the brother in the elevator with her for Tulsa.
Right. That's how it started. Yeah.
She lied.
Yeah.
It started
She
with
lied,
that.
yeah.
It was a white woman in Rosewood who falsely accused the brother for rape, and Rosewood went to flame. It was a white woman in Central Park that falsely accused his brother and said, put your dog on the leash. So there is a bill that's out now that I will be supporting that's calling for that being a felony if you use race as a base to abuse 911.
You also have Emmett Till as well.
Emmett Till, how could I forget Emmett Till? Yes, a white woman. So they have a history of doing this.
Yeah.
And why do they do it? Because they can. Because they have that white skin privilege. They know they can, and there's no consequences. See, at some point, we have to take control over our Black communities, the politics, the economics, the social, cultural institutions, and that can start from the bottom up. We have to get a security team. We have to get licensed security companies, if you know what I mean, so that people can secure our neighborhoods legally. We are in a state of emergency. And these politicians that are out there now, all of this fanfare, I went to a couple of demonstrations to organize something. Inez and I put pressure on the governor to give every public housing resident in our district, in my beloved East New York, they all have masks, they have gloves, they have sanitizer bottles, right? We also gave out food. We made sure that the senior centers, that DIPTA, the agency, was feeding our seniors. We made sure that our hospital was getting some, generators. They had to get the equipment, more staffing. We were focusing on a lot of that. We personally gave out 15,000 masks. And then we had to make sure that we secured a testing spot in our neighborhood for those. And my wife, Inez, she was able to get them to use CCC, the Christian Cultural Center, and the church that we have a very good relation, St. Paul's Community Baptist Church, did some testing for 4 or 5 days. So we had to fight for testing. See, here's the racism. How do we have, at the beginning, we have all of the corona problem, deaths, and everything, and you send a boat to the white community, a ship with 1,000 beds, and they use 200, and you send the ship back. How do you set up the Javits Center as a hospital, and they underutilized that in the white community? They weren't dying like we were. How do you set up Central Park as some medical facility? Central Park, the white community. We have a dock. Send us a ship, damn it. We have parks. Set our parks up with beds. You don't do the stuff toward us until we start screaming. And then 2 weeks ago, after 4 weeks, 5 weeks of dying, now you bring in masks and you bring in all of this stuff in. This racist system, we need a radical change, a revolution. We can't just be dealing with these issue after issue after issue, dealing with the symptoms. The symptoms. Police brutality is a symptom. Inadequate health care is a symptom. Miseducation is a symptom. Poverty is a symptom. Unemployment, mass incarceration, symptoms of a deeply rooted illness called racist, parasitic capitalism, forcing us to live in domestic colonies. And when the white man leaves the colony, they put black people to administer the colony with the same policies that the white man who put them in place. And that's what's happening. So I believe in the meantime strategy, so that they don't say, oh, he's talking all that stuff. How are we going to beat capitalism? We have a right now problem. That's why I ran for office. Because right now, Right now, I got jobs, 2,000 for our people. Right now, we renovated the parks, the schools, the youth center. Right now, we were able to get a lot of stuff in the meantime, pending the revolution. Because you can't just talk about right now and not talk about radical systemic changing of this capitalist system. That's the root of the problem. That's what radical means, getting to the root of the problem and not just organizing around symptoms. That's why we're radicals, getting to the root of the problem. And that's a racist, parasitic capitalist system with its warmongering, imperialistic policy. And you know what's the key to our liberation? Africa. The liberation of the continent of Africa so that its resources can be beneficial to all of us Africans in the diaspora, in the Caribbean, in the Americas, all of us in the diaspora. We got to fight for the liberation of Africa. You know what Obama did to Africa? Instead of giving them humanitarian aid, he built up the HAPI Command, military bases. Military bases increased under Obama. What kind of stuff is that? Military bases, not humanitarian aid. That's under Obama. HAPI Command, they call it. You know what he did with Israel? That old terrorist state of Israel? You want to fight terrorism? Fight the state of Israel. He made a deal with them for arms for 10 years for $38 billion. You know what Obama did? An embargo against Zimbabwe. And Robert Mugabe, when he was president, an embargo against Cuba, an embargo against Venezuela. Come on, man. You know, we got to say to this government, we are 50 million strong here, African people. Latino people are 50 million strong. Of the 326 million Americans, 100 million are black and brown. And if we say that you have to change your government, then damn it, that's what would happen. That's what would happen. You know what they did when they were sick of the King of England oppressing them for their so-called American Revolution? That wasn't no revolution. That was an American rebellion against the King of England and his exploitation of them. A revolution is when you change your system. They didn't change the system of slavery. As a matter of fact, England was going to abolish slavery. So they said, we're going to separate from them. And they wrote in their Declaration of Independence, when governments, they said governments exist at the consent of the governed. And when the governed are denied their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to alter, reform, or abolish that government, revolution, and usher in a new government. Well, if it's good for you against England, it's good for us against you.
Damn. You spoke about a minute ago the reason why you ran. And I think all too often, a lot of times, particularly in our community, we overlook the local elected officials. You know, our focus, a lot of this is driven by the media, because I think the local elected officials and the elections in our community don't get the coverage that they deserve. And all too often, we vote just pretty much in the presidential elections. How important are the local elected officials?
Far more important, I think, than even the presidential election. Let me break something down for you. There is no national election. It's state by state. Every state, and that's why they say blue states and red states. We have an electoral college. You want to hear something, y'all? You never voted for president in your life. You can't. What you voted for, when you voted for one of these presidential candidates, you voted for the electors of that state. The electoral college picks the president. You know, on the night when they're showing all of the stuff, somebody has to get 271 electoral votes. Even if you win the popular vote, like Hillary Clinton did, 66 million to Trump's 63 million. How the hell does 63 million people vote for Trump? But 66 to 63, he lost the popular vote. But that was irrelevant because your vote is not for president. Your vote is for the electors. So in New York State, if you vote for the Democratic candidate and that candidate wins, they win the 29 electors in that state. And then if your candidate gets the 261 or 271, the electors go in December. They vote for president. And you know, they don't have to vote for your candidate. They had some history of what they call faithless electors. And the Electoral College came into existence around racism because most of the population was in the South. And they said, look, if the South counts these blacks, Africans that they have enslaved as a part of their population, that's why the census counts. That's where 3/5 of a man came.
Wow.
They said, we counting you blacks as 3/5 because if you count as a whole person, then y'all going to win all the elections. That's why they did that. So nationally, you have less power and influence than you have locally. I say revolutionaries, radicals, let's rock them. Let's get in those state assemblies. Let's get in those city councils. We're tired of ancient mamas and Uncle Tom. No, I ain't even going to say Uncle Tom because, by the way, if you read Uncle Tom's Cabin, Sambo was the sellout. Uncle Tom was trying to help. But let's get rid of these who are working for the Democratic Party and not their people. Because on a local election with a $178 billion state budget and a $90 billion city budget, if we had strong Black and Latina politicians, do you know, and this the #1 city in the world, the most powerful city in the world is New York City. New York City is the citadel of capitalism. Wall Street is here. New York City is where the world meets, the United Nations. It's the media capital of the world. Every culture is here. Everything is in New York City. And we are the new majority, Black, Latinos, and Asians, if we ever got it right. The city is ours. If we ever said we're not voting for a budget that doesn't get $10 billion toward poverty, shouldn't be no poverty in New York City with all of this money. They say they're broke. Yeah, they're broke because you're giving it to the rich. So local politics, the city council, you know, every city council member gets $5 million for capital projects. Every city council member gets $500,000 to fund programs in their district, and every city council member gets $400,000 to $500,000 to hire staff. So if radicals and revolutionaries would win these seats, you could hire radicals on your staff, radical lawyers. Viola Plummer is my chief of staff. She's with the December 12th movement. Omawale Clay is working in my wife's office. He's a radical, a revolutionary. A.T. Mitchell is the head of our community board, a radical, independent, for the people. That's what we need. That's why local politics is where you can have some serious control. How many people are going to control Biden or Trump? Just like you couldn't even control Obama. So you surely are not going to be able to control these other fools.
So we talked about the electoral college for a minute ago. How does that system work in terms of individuals being chosen or elected to that position?
Very good question. Your Democratic Party has a process in which they select their electors. And those are some of the loyal members. Some of them are from unions. Some of them are elected officials. They select them through that process. The Republican Party has a process. They select 29 electors. If there's an independent party on the ballot, they select 29 electors. And then when the election happens, And if the candidate of your party wins the popular vote, then your electors go in December to vote for president. You know, even if, and I don't know if I would even support this, but this would be better, but they'll never do it. If they had a proportional distribution of the electors and not winner take all. See, that's how they maintain the two-party system, because they know in most states either a Republican or a Democrat's going to win. Remember Ross Perot?
Absolutely.
He got 20 million votes, 20 million, 0 electoral votes, because he didn't win the majority in any state. How do you win 20 million votes and no electoral votes? Winner take all. Imagine if we did it proportionately. Some people say get rid of it and do the, popular vote. I don't know if that helps us a lot, because we as Black people have no state where we are the majority. The most we have in a state is Mississippi with about 40%. But if you did a proportional distribution of the electoral college, then it wouldn't be winner take all. So if we ran you, brother, in New York on an independent line, and you got 5% of the vote, you would have to get 5% of the electoral vote. And nobody would get to 271 because it would be proportionately distributed. So therefore, at the end, they might have to talk to you to get your 5% to be president. Then you have leverage. But right now, with winner take all, California has 55 electoral votes. So whoever wins that wins all 55. We have 29. Florida has 29. Others, So it's Republican and Democrat. That's not democracy.
No.
That's the dictatorship of a two-party capitalist system.
On that note, would you say that Democrat? Because a lot of people feel this way, that obviously Black people vote blindly Democratic Party. Do you feel the Democratic Party has forgotten Black people?
Forgotten Black people? They never remembered us from the beginning.
Yeah, I think that was a better question. Yes.
No, I understand. But you remember when this first started, we were the only people that came out of slavery and joined the party of our oppressors. But anyway, remember when we first came out of enslavement, we joined the party of Lincoln and Fred Douglass, the Republicans. They were racist, but the Democrats were more racist.
Yeah.
So they didn't support abolishing slavery, and we weren't even allowed to join their party. Those redneck crackers, Dixiecrat, whatever. So we went Republican. Then in 1877, when they had the Rutherford B. Hayes Compromise, and they said, listen, if you work with us and let us put Blacks back in their place, because 1865 they abolished slavery. And remember, slavery shall be abolished except as a punishment for crime. We went from the plantation to the penitentiary. And then they had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 13th Amendment so-called abolished slavery. I say it transferred it. And the 14th Amendment gave us citizenship, and the 15th Amendment gave Black men the right to vote. Let me tell you how crazy these folk are. Only people that were allowed to vote then were white men with property. So the 15th Amendment, because the South had all the Blacks and they wanted to give us the right to vote, they gave Black men the right to vote before they gave white women the right to vote. White women won the right to vote with the suffrage movement in the 1920, 1921. So they said Black men could vote if you own property. So that's why Black men started to buy property so that they can vote. And when Reconstruction came and the Freedmen's Bureau and Special Order 15 under General Sherman gave us property, we actually did get reparations. The Sea Islands, we got the property there, Look up this brother named Tunis Campbell. Tunis Campbell. He was the head of the Freedmen's Bureau, later became an elected official during Black Reconstruction, but he went to St. Catherine's and brought 500 Africans with him. That was the 40 acres and a mule. They gave him the 40 acres, and he said, now we need some mules so we can cultivate the land. They set up a government. They set up schools. They set up everything on St. Catherine's Island and the Sea Islands. And whites, that was confiscated land that the North confiscated from the Southern Confederacies. So after they confiscated the land, they gave it to Africans on the Sea Islands. And they were developing it. They had a whole system. They had their own president, their own Senate, their own government. And they had a militia of a couple of hundred Black men to protect it. Then came, I think, Andrew Jackson was the president after Lincoln was assassinated, or Andrew Jackson, one of that. He was more racist than Lincoln, because Lincoln was a racist. He wanted to send us back to Africa and have an all-white America. But he reversed all of that, and they took the land back, and we've been suffering ever since. So that's what the Republicans did and the Democrats did. So by the compromise of 1877, they allowed for the Democrats to put us back in check as long as they can have a Republican president. So they put us back in check. They removed the federal troops. The KKK rose up. They terrorized us. By the time we hit the 19th century, the 20th century, we had nothing. That's why when you see during the 60s, they say the first governor since Reconstruction, because in Black Reconstruction, we had a governor, Governor Pinchback. He was the first governor. We had Congress people. We passed legislation, free education. Then they took it all back. So since they took it all back, then here came Franklin Delano Roosevelt with the New Deal during the Great Depression. There was no real deal for us, but we were fooled into thinking it was a New Deal because he had a Black cabinet and all of that. That's when the Blacks came back to the Democratic Party. And then by the 60s, with the civil rights legislation, we were fully Black back with the Democratic Party. And they've been taking us for granted ever since. That's how we got blindly Democratic. We need to move to an independent, Black, consciously Black. You know, Dr. Lonnie Grenier in her book said there are two kinds of Black people. Some are descriptively Black, they look like you, and some are authentically Black, they are committed to you. So we need some authentically Black leaders committed to a Black agenda and Black people, and put them in an independent, formulate an independent Black-led party, and still do the Democratic primary until we can get that party to win elections in November and getting our people out of this Democratic Party, which may take some serious time.
How difficult would it be to create our own independent party? Because obviously, just by history and that brief history right there, we know we don't have any allies on the Republican side. We don't have any allies on the Democratic side. So how do we create our own independent party that's about our agenda?
I was engaged in two efforts to do that. One was the Unity Party, and the other was the Freedom Party. I ran for governor. I think it was 2012. I ran for governor on the Freedom Party ticket. We got 43,000 signatures to get on the ballot. We had to get 100 from 15 different congressional districts. That was a real challenge, but we got it. You needed 20,000 or 15,000. We got 40,000. We got on the ballot. You have to get 50,000 votes to get a party line that the state recognizes. We got 25,000. But you know, I tried to tell folks, you don't need to be recognized by the state. Every election, we could have run as the Freedom Party as long as you got the signatures in August to have an independent line in November. We used to get the signatures in June to get on the Democratic Party line in September. We could do that right now. But we had a lot of internal conflicts, internal contradictions, and the effort was destroyed. by internal stuff. So we could do that anytime we're ready. Anytime we're ready. Operation Power, we're looking at that now to try it again. Maybe next election or the election after that, we can get signatures in August for an independent Operation Power line in November and still run on the Democratic line because they have fusion voting. You can vote for me on the Democratic line and the Freedom Party line in November. And if we do that continuously until we raise up the number of people in the Power Party, then we don't even have to run in September, or now it's June in the Democratic primary. We can go straight to the November election. But that's going to take a lot of consciousness raising and a lot of work.
Would you say that Black people are disenchanted when it comes to politics, and if so, why?
They're disenchanted because politicians lie. They make empty promises. They sell us out. They see that the vote doesn't count. Sometimes even when we win, they take it from us because of how this system deals. So politicians have a bad name. Electoral politics have a bad name. And that's why I'm trying to tell them that politics is not dirty. People are. We got to get the right people. Because whether you like it or not, politics is involved with you. Whether you're going to have clean air or all of the polluting projects are going to be in your district is a political decision. How often the garbage is going to be picked up in your district is a political decision. Whether your senior citizens and your youth centers are going to be cut is a political decision. Whether they're going to cut your programs or tax the rich is a political decision. You say you don't want to be involved in politics. Well, I hate to disappoint you, but politics is involved in you, whether you want to control it or not. So we better get involved. Doesn't matter that you have some sellout Negroes. You need to still get involved and do it like I did. I joined my block association first. I spoke at school board meetings, community board meetings, organized around issues until I got known. And then they told me to run. And now we transformed the infrastructure of East New York. And still, y'all know I'm in the mayor's face, the governor's face. I interrupted his top meeting, his state of the state address. Look on the YouTube, you'll say Barron interrupts governor. And he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do. And did I get punished? No. His office called me up and said, Charles, what do you want? We're going to do a park in your district. Will you stand with the governor? I said, no, do the park, governor, but I will not be standing with you because I don't agree with you and your politics. But my community needs a park. Do the park anyway. And he did, a Shirley Chisholm Park, and he got some other Negroes to stand with him.
Wow. So the next generation and politics and preparing ourselves for the future. All too often as Black people, we don't forwardly think in terms of our preparation. What can we do to develop, foster, even influence the next generation to get into politics and develop our politicians that are consciously minded people?
Let me say to you that any movement in the electoral arena or any movement in street protests and demonstrations without an ideology and a vision is like flying a plane without radar. You won't know where you're going to land. You can even crash in the air and you can be thrown off course. We need to develop ideologically. We don't just need Black faces in high places. Black visibility is not Black power.
Right. Yeah, this is true.
Look, we got it all here. We got a bunch of Black invisible positions here in New York. So we need to do ideological development along with people committed to the streets protest and to the local electoral politics with Black radical politics. I think that's where this generation, this future generation go. We don't need neoliberal Democrats that support a capitalist system. We don't need neoconservative Democrats that support a capitalist system. We need Black radical politics that are revolutionary and are calling for the dismantling of a capitalist system and replacing it with the system of your choice, socialism, African communalism, but any kind of system that's humane, egalitarian, and any system that is controlled by the people. That's what we should fight for. And in the meantime, get in those city council seats, get in those state assembly seats, so we can deal with the material benefits for our neighborhoods. Amilcar Cabral, the great African revolutionary of Guinea-Bissau, said, bear in mind, the people are not fighting for ideas in your head. They're fighting for material benefits and a future for their children. So mask no difficulties, tell no lies, and claim no easy victories. We should use that to get material benefits for our people and raise their revolutionary consciousness at the same time. And we should remember what Steve Biko said: the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So revolutionaries is not just about picking up guns and doing something. A revolutionary is one who's going to get to the minds of our people and let them know that we can win. All great empires rise and fall. Capitalism is dying, but they want to convince you, one, that you're powerless to beat them, and two, that they're invincible, and they're right. So blame it on some demonstrators who are being misled by some other groups, not on capitalism and its greed and its exploitation. So we have to say, life is hard if you take it by the yard, but it's a cinch if you take it inch by inch. We will win. African proverb says the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Just like the British said, the sun never set on the British Empire. It was so vast. Now they're a little cloudy country in Europe talking about Brexit because they're in economic trouble. They no longer have an empire, because all great empires rise and fall. No form of our oppression is permanent. It's temporary. And any leader that subscribes to the permanency of your oppression is not fit to lead you.
How can we translate that to, I guess, more of a youth movement, or even something in schools, or I hate to use the term ROTC program, but like a program that it's centered around getting young high school or even college age students or children to say, I want to take a role in conscious, active politics for my community?
Very good question. We have groups that we have started, like Man Up Inc. with Andre T. Mitchell. It's a program for sisters and brothers. And they have summer camps that are culturally conscious. They're in schools with their program, teaching our people about their history and themselves and the importance of activism. They have teamed with other youth in the movement. They're working with them. Every young person and every person of African descent in this state and listening to this broadcast, you should be a part of some organization. And if there's no organization you like out there, then start your own. But nobody should be a part of nothing. There are a lot of organizations, a lot of people doing things. Find one that's doing what you think should be done and join it. And if not, start your own on your block. We're going to be liberated block by block. We knock on doors for campaigns. We stand at train stations. We go into supermarkets. We go into churches. We go into businesses, schools, blocks, tenant associations, and public housing. We need to organize our people. And I'm not saying they should all join Operation Power and join us. Start your own or join something in your neighborhood. But I think that it would be good to start an activist organization that's in the streets mobilizing around issues, and a organizing effort for power. As I started this broadcast, we need power. And if you get that done, then you would have that combination, and that can be done in every one of our communities where we constitute the majority. We should be getting rid of the sellout Democrats and get Black independent radicals, revolutionaries, fighting for systemic change and then mobilizing around the symptoms.
Does the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, have like, I guess, like a mentorship where?
I don't know if they do, and I don't know if they're their answer, because they've been awful quiet on a lot of stuff. I don't know if the CBC is the answer. I think CBCs and some of these other groups are a part of the Democratic Party establishment. I'm talking about something more radical,
Right?
Something more independent. I'm a part of the caucus in the state. I'm talking about something independent of that even.
Right.
We need an independent, grassroots, Black radical political electoral movement. And we should start it in every one of our communities where activists are.
With everything we talked about, obviously with the police brutality issues that's going on right now, COVID-19 has been kind of, for some, it's interesting. We've been dealing with this for the last 3.5 months, but it's been kind of pushed somewhat to the second burner in the public. Do you think the government has done enough to mitigate the disproportionality things that are occurring in the Black community and how the COVID pandemic has impacted us?
Absolutely not. The racism has caused more death in our community than it should have been. Had they brought those resources early on, when they knew we were going to be the most affected, because we're the poorest and we have the most health conditions in it, because you created the condition for us to be unhealthy. So you knew that was going to happen. I'm fighting now in the state assembly, as I told you before, with the bill that says, if this thing comes back in the fall, like y'all are predicting, then my bill will say that prioritization of resources have to go to nursing homes, the most vulnerable, and Black and brown low-income neighborhoods, the most vulnerable. That we have to fight for. So I'm going to fight for the passage of that bill. And I'm also concerned right now, forget the second wave coming. I'm concerned that we may not get out of this wave if we continue to go out there and not adhere to some kind of social distancing and wearing masks. I went out for the demonstrations. I understand that. We can't let nothing stop us from doing that. But at least when you go out, protect yourself. Because now there could be not an ending. This can spike things to come up, especially when they start opening things up. So I'm a little concerned that we would spike things up. I survived it.
Yes.
I was affected myself. And someone said, I heard that you beat the coronavirus. I said, no, that thing beat the hell out of me. I survived it. See, when you get affected by that, and I was in real bad shape. They didn't even want to tell me. I had 102 degrees temperature. I had a pneumonia. I was dizzy. I had shortness of the breath. I knew I was in trouble because when I got into the hospital, they isolated me. And then they came in my room and said, you know what? We need to take you down to the ICU unit, intensive care. I said, uh-oh. But of course, my queen, who was affected as well, she just didn't have no symptoms. Inez Barron, she was with me, encouraging me. I had to go to ICU. Brother, I was so weak, and it was killing me. I'm used to fighting with energy. I couldn't even get out of bed without help. And so I was in ICU, and then they came after the second day, and they said, we don't have good news for you. Your condition worsened. I said, worsened? Can't get no worse than this. And so the doctor said, but don't worry, you're not going to die. I said, excuse me. Don't ever mention death and my name in the same breath, because I'm getting out of here. And I told them, I believe in God and I believe in myself. And I'll be honest with you, bro. Death never crossed my mind. And not for once did I said, oh my God, am I going to die? It never crossed my mind. And I was in pretty good shape. So my immune system was fighting. They came in the next day. They said, we don't know what happened. I said, prayers and my belief that I'm getting out of here. That's what happened. I don't know what you doctors are doing, but I got work to do.
I hear that.
Some unfinished work to do, and I'm getting up on out of here. And before you know it, I start getting better. Each day, my oxygen count went up from 88 to 92. They wanted me at 95. My temperature went down to 98.4. All of that stuff started working. And I said, you know, the bed is probably needed by someone else who's worse off than me. And I don't know how much more y'all could do for me. So let me go home and continue my battle, my queen. When I got in my house, there's something about the spirit of your home and the spirit of your loved one. I got strength that I could not believe. Now I'm doing exercise. My oxygen rate is 90%. My blood pressure is 121/75. My sugar count is low. My temperature is 98. Man, I'm like 90% back. I still got some congestion, a little coughing, but I have antibodies now because it's out of my system, and I have the antibodies when I went back to be checked. But we're not out of it as a people. And some of our people didn't believe that this thing for us. One of the good things, if there is a good thing about me being affected and it was on the news, some people in my community said, oh, that's a white man's disease. We ain't getting that. And then when they said, did you hear Charles Barron had it? They said, ain't nobody blacker than him in East New York. We better check this. They took it more serious. So if there's any benefit, that was a benefit. And now people took it more serious. And I hope we take it very serious now. I know we got to protest and fight two killers, killer cops and the killer virus. We got to fight them both. And we got to fight them with resistance and resiliency.
We just want to echo something someone in the audience said, Raymond King. We're glad you're doing better because we need you.
Oh, thank you so much, Raymond. I appreciate it, brother. And I'm telling you, it was the love of the people, the prayers of the people that got me through. I had thousands of people praying, and I'm sure the angels up in heaven, as my wife said, who is that Baron? Who are those Barons? Because we get a lot of prayers up in here. So I thank everybody for their prayers and positive thoughts. If you don't pray, your good wishes for us, because it worked. When we knew we had you, I knew I was coming out the hospital.
So back to disenchantment, just people being disenchanted or just disenfranchised. Is voting the solution? And if so, why?
No, it's not. Voting is a tactic. It's a strategy. I think the masses on the move make revolutions when they rise up with incredible numbers and say we no longer can be governed. You know, I remember Mahatma Gandhi in his movie Gandhi, and the British were laughing at him because they had all the power, and the Indians were rising up and they were taking care of their own sugar and salt and all of that. So it was getting bad, and they was beating him down, and he refused to be violent. So he had a meeting with them, and they said, Gandhi, Mr. Gandhi, how are you going to beat us? And how are you going to get us out of here? We got guns, cannon. He said, you will leave on your own, because 500,000 British can't continue to control 400 million Indians. You will walk out on your own. And that's what they did. And the same thing with Mao and the masses in China, the same thing with the masses in Africa. Do you realize that all of these African governments that were colonized, that there were millions, 26 million Africans in South Africa and 500,000 whites, and you're controlling us? Huey P. Newton said, the spirit of the people is greater than the technology of our enemy. So it is the people that have the power. Even in the governments, it's the people that have the power. So when the people rise up, we're going to win. The job of the capitalist propaganda is to convince you that they're invincible, to convince you that Charles Barron is wrong and they're right, to convince you that us radicals are just wishful thinkers and romantics from the 60s, and that you can't beat capitalism. So if they convince you there, half the job is done. So my job as a revolutionary is to convince you that they are vulnerable, that they don't have the power. And that's why the Black Panther Party said, power to the people. We meant that. The power is in the people. So I know we're going to win. Question is how, when, and with who. But I know we're going to win. And so that's my job. And the way we can be more convincing is if we begin to take over the local politics and deliver some material benefits to our people. Once they see you can do that and be revolutionary, they told me, Charles, if you're going to run for politics, you got to put on a shirt and tie. I said, I don't wear shirt and ties. They said, you got to, and don't tell people you were in the Black Panther Party. I said, I'm going to tell them everything. As a matter of fact, I said more things as a politician than I did when I was an activist. I was at a rally in Washington and was on reparations. So I got up and I said, brothers and sisters, sick of this, sitting here rallying for reparations. Let's go to the State Department and the Treasury. Let's take our reparations. Yeah, now, ain't even no money there. They just write checks. I'm talking. And then I said this, and it stuck with me for my whole career. I said, as a matter of fact, when I get back to New York, the first white man in power I see, I'm going to slap him for my Black mental health and tell him it's a Black thing. Now, I forgot about ABC, NBC, New York One. So when I got back to New York, all of the politicians said, the media said we should throw you out. You made some racist slap statement. What did you say? I was on this conservative program, so they asked me, they said, I knew they had it. Said, you was at the reparations rally, right, Mr. Barron? I said, absolutely. I said, didn't you say you was going to slap the first white man that you saw of power? I said, absolutely. And they said, well, Mr. Barron, why? What do you? I said, it was a case of oratorical improvisation and Black hyperbole. They said, what? I said, oratorical improvisation and Black hyperbole. So they said, what's a Black hyperbole? I said, well, when I got on my mother's last nerve on Monday, she said, boy, I'll slap you into Tuesday. That's a hyperbole. That didn't mean Monday wasn't going to happen. That's a hyperbole. So they're fools. They say, give me another one. I said, my mother said, I brought you in this world, I'll take you out. Yeah. I said, that's not my mother's commitment to murder. That's a hyperbole. So they said, oh, you were just joking. I said, no, my mother wasn't playing with me, and I'm not playing with y'all. Now let's talk about reparations. And that stuck with me for all my career. And I say this to them, and I announce it myself. When I got to the state assembly, they said, the rules of the assembly chambers, you have to wear a shirt and tie. I said, I'm not. And they said, why not? I said, because I'm African. I'm an African man born in America. Y'all stole me and brought me here. I'm not a white man. I don't wear shirts and ties. I wear those Nehru suits, those no-collar suits, and like Kwame Nkrumah had, like Julius Nyerere had. I wear that. That's my dress. I don't wear shirts and ties. And I dare you to stop me. By the time I got there, all the media was ready. They said, no, we read the rules. This is all right for him to do that. I changed the rules on dress. Some of the white guys were angry. But see, you got to take those kinds of stances. I only mention all of that to say, don't let them get away with nothing. Don't give them an inch. Keep your back straight, Black people. Stand up to them. Stand on your principles, and you will always win.
On that note, I don't even know if this is even possible, but this year being a presidential election year, can we put a list of demands together and present them to both candidates and say, listen, if you want our vote, these are the things you need to do for us?
You can do that, but you got to have the power to back it up. And right now, I see no national political movement of Black power to back it up. Yes, I say do that. I'm sticking to local politics. I am not going for, we got to stop Trump. We got to stop Trump. I'm not Trumpetized. Trump is the stupidest, idiotic, racist, fascist, xenophobic, power hungry, insecure idiot that ever became president, and he must go. He's not an option. But Joe Biden shouldn't get a pass. Joe Biden shouldn't get your vote because you want to stop Trump. I told somebody, give me a reason to vote for Joe Biden without mentioning Trump's name. They couldn't. So I'm saying to our people, vote for whoever you want on a national level. I'm no longer voting for the lesser two evils. I did that for a long time. I'm only voting for people that support reparations, freedom of political prisoners, universal free health care, free education, and a Green New Deal. If you ain't supporting that, I'm not going with you. And I don't think either one of those presidential candidates are supporting that. I'm not even supporting local candidates that don't support that, at least anymore. And I supported a lot of these Negroes that got in office and was profoundly disappointed, from President Obama to Ken Thompson, may he rest in peace. I supported Tish James. She's horrible. So I'm not doing that anymore. And I'm not telling you not to, but I'm voting for Black radical politics on a local level. And whoever gets in, we'll deal with it. Just like we dealt with Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Obama, Trump. Whoever gets in, we're going to deal with it.
With your distinguished political career, can you name or give us one of the things that you would say is your greatest victory as an elected official?
Oh man, that's a good question. The greatest victory as an elected official is when I saw that 2-story, state-of-the-art youth center come into my district, something I always wanted since I got in, and have Black people from my district running it. We have a white organization that's funding some of the daily expenses, and they have Black people that they hired in, but they still had to hire Black people from our district. And we have Man Up, AT and Mitchell. They also are part of running it. That to me was an accomplishment that I'm so proud of. Now, we did all the housing in the parks, but that one is going to outlive me. And it's something I've always wanted. In there, we have a state-of-the-art gymnasium. We have a place where they can learn karate and dancing. We have another culinary arts section part where they can learn cooking and all of that. We have a computer lab, and we have a recording studio in there. And we have pictures of Black people all over the place and Latino people. It is my pride and joy. Is the Prince Joshua, poor little boy that was stabbed in the elevator. We named it after him. That's my pride and joy.
Wow, that's so great. It's beautiful. With that, we want to salute you, everyone. We definitely love and respect you for what you're doing. Want to tell you to stay strong.
Thank you.
Keep up the fight. With that, we do have, if you have a few more minutes, we have some questions from the audience we're going to open up to. We have a question from Gene. Should we focus on business and entrepreneurship so we can create a healthier state of economic prosperity?
Yes, but not if it's capitalistic business, not if it's entrepreneurs for individuals to get the same structure as the capitalist structure, so that some individual Black people make some money and hire a few of us. I support cooperative economics, where the workers own the enterprise, so that it's more collective, cooperative economics, like we say on the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, the Nguzo Saba, and that is cooperative economics, Ujamaa. That's what I would support.
Okay. We have another question from Raymond King Jr. He wants to know about the census. Filling out the census, will it influence or foster positive change?
No, it's just you should be counted. They say because if you're counted, that you will get programs and money. So fill it out, be counted, But just filling out the census, there's no magic in that. You have to organize after you fill it out. After you count it, now we have to make sure that we organize in our communities to make sure that these programs come to our districts. Because we've been counted before, and they still haven't sent no programs in unless you're organized. So I say, yes, fill it out. I encourage people to fill it out, but you're not automatically going to get programs because you filled out the census. Fill it out and organize.
Wow. We have one from another question from brother named Seed. How can we return to separate but equal?
Separate from the capitalist system?
Yes, separate in the sense of like Tulsa having our own separate communities.
Right. That's what I want to do by taking over the politics and the economics in our local communities where we are the majority. You have to have equal power. If you don't have equal power, then you're not going to have any kind of respect and freedom. So I say wherever we constitute the majority in a community, we got to get the right elected officials in office so we can control the economy, so that the dollar can travel 10 times before it leaves our community through Black cooperative businesses, so that we can own the land, the means of production, and that we can have control over the police, the education. All of that can happen if we control the politics and the economics of communities where we constitute the majority. I think that's an in the meantime strategy that could work. We did it here in East New York. We don't control the police yet. We don't control the hospital yet, but the hospital president from Brookdale has to meet with me. And I tried to get a Black person in there, and not just any Black person, but one that was conscious. So we're still fighting for that. The school superintendent is Black. We want to get Black history mandated in our schools, and I want to get into Black language too. That's another program we need to talk about, Ebonics. But that happens because I'm in a seat of power. And for the policing, we want to set up this independent civilian complaint review board so we can control the police and the policies.
Wow. We have a two-part question from Hank. Can you talk about the role of Operation Power and you and Inez electoral strategy? And how does independent political organization combine with winning elected office to build power, keep elected officials accountable, and train successors to follow you?
Well, Operation Power got me elected, got Inez elected. What we did, I learned their game. I learned how to master beating the machine. I have a book coming out, by the way, in July. I have a book coming out, and one of the articles is a compilation of 80 articles. One of them is How to Beat the Machine. So what we did, I learned how to get on the ballot. I learned how to pick the right seat to run for that I could win, because I did the demographics. 70% of the people were Black and 20 were Latino. I knew how to do a mailing strategy. I knew how to do an election day operation. I knew how much money I needed to raise to win. I knew where the vote was that came out, the primary vote. I did my research. I did my homework. And we in Operation Power studied that. Then we have to get to our people. There's 5 or 6 ways you got to get to your people before they'll even remember your name. Subways. Give out your literature on the subways. Posters in stores. Door to door wins the war. Knock on them doors. Put literature, lit drops under the doors. Supermarkets. Get tenant leaders on your side. Social media communications. Mass media. Get on Brooklyn 12 and New York 1 as much as you can. And there's nothing more important sometimes than robocalls. $200 and you can call or send a call to 5,000 people. All of that, plus I have a dedicated team of 15, 20 people that's willing to sacrifice, and you could beat the machine. But you gotta be with the people, and you could beat the machine. And that's what we did. We beat the machine. So our empowerment is not to hold other people accountable. We taking them out of office. We didn't organize Operation Power, people organizing and working for empowerment and respect is the acronym. We didn't do that to hold the local council member accountable or the local assembly member accountable. We organized for power, took them out. We replaced them. We ain't trying to hold them accountable. We replaced them. And that's what a radical movement could do.
It's powerful. This last question here from Ms. Taylor is, how is Africa the key?
Africa is the key because it's the wealthiest continent in the world. And Europe survives because of Africa, ripping off its resources. China is ripping off Africa. All the Middle East is ripping off Africa. The transatlantic slave trade took millions of us, depopulated Africa, took our best. The Arab slave trade took even more to the Middle East that they don't talk about. Africa is the richest continent in the world. And we have some meetings with the African diaspora. That is those of us who live outside of Africa and were dropped off in different places. Dr. Clark said the best way to identify ourselves, he said, we're not who we are based upon where the boats dropped us off, Brazil, Jamaica, America. We are who we are based upon where the boats picked us up from. So they picked us all up from Africa. You became Jamaican and Haitian and all of that, and American and all of that, African American. You became that because that's where they dropped you off. But we were all African people. So if we unite with Africa, just like Puerto Rico is important to Puerto Rican people, and China is important to Chinese people, and Italy is important to Italian people, us African people in America got to identify with Africa where we were stolen from and dropped off here, even if we were mixed with other races. And you can say, I ain't no African, I'm Black American, whatever. We all life started in Africa. And that is the richest continent in the world. So if we liberate Africa, then its resources will be for the people on the continent and the African people in the diaspora. We will have an economic base.
Wow, that's powerful. On that note, we want to give people a shout out. There's a lot of people in the audience today, and we really appreciate them. We had Jeannie Teller, Raymond King Jr. People had a lot of great questions in the audience. Rodney Taylor, he's from your district. Actually, he lived in Cypress Hills.
Okay.
A friend of mine's. Augustus Gus Edwards, Gerald Houston. We definitely want to give shout outs to all the supporters. People like King Simon. Definitely want to shout out the HAPI team, Tahuti Films. His brother made that phenomenal trailer and the piece that you saw. See Haru, really, really is the top of the line when it comes to production company.
Oh yeah,
Elaine is corner. Elena, Felicia Hartford, Eric Shepard, so many other people, Dion, Rock, Chuck, Tammy, all those people are part of the HAPI team. We want to thank you. We want to thank all those who came in, listened tonight to this very powerful, informative discussion, again, with HAPI Talks. Stay tuned next week, or stay tuned with us for the announcement for who we will have next week. Also, please subscribe, like the Facebook page, subscribe to us on the YouTube channel, because it's going to be more informative discussions like this in the future. With that, my name is Taki, and I just want to bid everyone farewell. Good night.
Good night.